for that. I really need an audio stinger to go with that sucker. But anyway, hey, welcome everybody. Our guest tonight is Matt Friendly, and we're gonna be talking all about making what basically the real crux, no pun intended, of it is what happens when the thing that you're doing goes through a dramatic shift, right? What happens when you are you have a way that you're doing things, and the whole industry changes basically right out from under you. So we're going to talk a lot about that here in just a short second. But before I got to breathe, first of all. But before I go there, I did want to make just one quick announcement about the shop. We are, of course, the SYN Shop, located at 1075 American Pacific Drive, and that's Suite C in beautiful Henderson, Nevada. However, we, number one, we're going to be moving soon. More about that in just a second. But unless you remember, you're going to have to wait a little bit to come check out the shop. For the most part, we're close to the public, with a couple exceptions on the meetup that you can see. But at any rate, we would like to remind you that while we are mostly closed to the public, if you are in a shared space elsewhere, to make sure that you clean tools, surfaces, and material before and after you use them. Always do what you can to limit your exposure to yourself and others. Be sure to wear a mask, don't touch your face, and for Pete's sake, wash your damn hands. And to stay updated on the shop's open status, you can check out synshop.org/COVID status to find out the latest information. To make sure you're notified of future events, including virtual ones just like this, you can join us at meetup.com/Synshop. So let's bring in our guest. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to present DJ Matt Friendly. How you doing?
I'm well. Thank you so much for having me here today. It's an honor to be with the folks here at Synshop, Crux. You know, it's great to see you.
Excellent. So now it was an interesting road by which you joined us tonight, because how do I put this? Last week, you just came into our chat and we're watching the show. I think for several weeks you've been watching the show. And, it was just like, that was the first time that I, really became aware of you. And Zenify was like, hey, we should have you on the show to talk music stuff. And I was like, okay, sure. so then I start looking at your bio, and it's interesting because you and I traveled, well, not necessarily in the same circles, but there's like a Venn diagram of people that we know, because you work with someone that I used to work with, well, very briefly, a long time ago. So Donald Glaude in Seattle plays at the club that you play at, and I actually put out a record on his label I put out a track on one of the records that he put out a long time ago.
Yeah, which was a surprise. That was a shocker to me when you told me this information. So it really felt like, the Synshop podcast would be a great place to stop by. It seems like there's a lot of overlap in your path, and certainly in the path that I've walked. But it's great to actually have, thanks for the invite, Pong. And, the Synshop was a fun place. I remember visiting the Las Vegas shop when I was living there and working there. And so that's kind of how I learned of it. And, the good work that you folks do there with all the creators and makers and fabricators, that's really it's kind of a lost art, so it's cool to be here amongst you artisans, you skilled artisans.
Absolutely. It's been really, really interesting. So what brought you up to Seattle then from Vegas, or were you just visiting?
Well, no, I was actually living in Vegas, and then some opportunities kind of opened up to come up and do music in Seattle. And so, I kind of figured there's a lot of well-known artists that sort of found their roots and really kind of sprung up into their stardom in Seattle. So I figured, might as well give it a go, right? Before I kick the bucket. It's a bucket list item. So, absolutely. So when I got here, a family sort of invited me into their sort of world, and I got to know them, and that's the In Motion family here, In Motion crew. Shout out! This is my Seattle local family, and so as a DJ, I think it's really important that when you move to a new city, you just have to find some people that sort of you can kind of coalesce with and groove with, I guess is the proper terminology there. And In Motion was that. There were a lot of people who they were all pretty much working full time, but they love to listen to music and just kind of enjoy a night out on the city. And so I kind of found a home there. And after a little bit of time, just kind of getting to know everybody and the music they like. I started playing with them, and I didn't get to play when Donald Glaude came out, but he's definitely he's an extended family member of the In Motion crew that I'm a part of. So
Yeah.
that's kind of the history and how we have that significance. That's not the only overlap that we have. I think you're also a fan of the software that I use as well to do some of the production. So
as a matter of fact, I am. Yeah. On the Monday shows, I play. We usually have music running in the background, and so for my the stream that I normally was doing broadcasts of Satisfactory, the game Satisfactory, I was doing broadcasts of that. I got kind of tired of that, and so I started doing broadcasts of me making music in Reason. So you can see that at twitch.tv/The Mighty Pong. But that is so cool that Donald. He is the nicest DJ that I've ever met. Like, he is the nicest guy in the whole business in the time from 92 to 2012-ish that I played. He was easily the nicest guy that I've ever met. Like, just amazing. So, but at any rate, so now, how long had you been playing? How long were you DJing?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I started DJing sort of officially in 2012, and that was not in Seattle. That was back in Hawaii, where I'm sort of from. And so that was another sort of situation where I was working full time in tech, and I kind of didn't have enough outlet for my passions or hobbies and interests. And so music kind of came along, and I started always kind of was interested in the music, because I started going to raves at an early age, and then sort of grew out of it as a phase. But something amazing kind of happened. The music world revitalized itself in the world of electronic dance music. Artists like Avicii that became huge crossover hits in the late 2010s really kicked off kind of a renaissance era in the world of dance music. And so I kind of came into that a little bit early. It was still very early on in 2012, where I think not a lot of people knew what was happening. So it's been about 8 years or so since I kind of picked up. And so, of course, I got another what's called a DJ controller. Yeah. And so these tools made it pretty easy to sort of just buy a unit and actually start making mixes at home. And so that seemed like a pretty simple place to start. And as I started getting familiar with that, I started seeking connections with other people that were into the same music. And so I started looking around in different shows and different venues that were in the Hawaii area. That's when I learned of a family called the Peer Coalition. And they had no problem setting up time and building out a space and bringing in a big sound system and working the door and bringing in security so that everybody was safe and cleaning up afterwards, all the way down to the last piece of paper.
But yeah, so that is super interesting. So you missed then two of the what I would call the great upheavals. So then the second one was about, I would say, probably so when you got into it, then this would be interesting. When you first got into it in 2012, was that already accepted, or was there still a resistance to it? Was because when I was doing it in 03, 04-ish, something like that, people were against it. They were like, "No, you can't do that. You got to use vinyl and blah blah blah." So
I think the debate still rages on today. If you ask 2 or 3 DJs, you'll get 3 or 4 answers on this one. It truly is a debate right now. But I believe that as time has elapsed in this war, I think what they're finding is that a DJ is really more about the selector. Certainly, the evolution of the digital DJing and the digital vinyl systems where they actually use the time-coded vinyl. I'm not sure how familiar you are with that part of it, but it's amazing to me how they've actually taken people who were really kind of accustomed to the vinyl, texture and feel, and then they made sort of this like utilitarian view, like tool out of it, which is just blank vinyl that you could just load your MP3 into the software, and then the vinyl you would just use to control the song that was playing. Right. And so, so I think kind of back to the original point of the night, which is the evolution of these different, points where, there was a divergence in the force, things had to kind of shift gears and people had to adapt. Mm-hmm. And the digital vinyl system was one of those ways where it actually made that more available, more accessible to people. Now, some would argue that wasn't necessarily a good thing. Now we have more DJs and more, podcasts and things like that. But overall, that sort of just drives the whole, industry forward.
Noob Shacks, there we go. Says he was
promoting,
he was promoting in Hawaii when Matt came on the scene. We had a whole thing against controllers and didn't allow local DJs to play with them now.
The attitude really, never went away. So I think at some point you have to ask: is it really about the medium that you use, or is there sort of a reverse snobbery in there somewhere? Where if you don't do it this way, But he's right. Nubishax is a promoter in Hawaii, and shout out Nubish. But he's also somebody that's was attracted to the positivity, in the scene, and was really a infectious element themselves of positivity. And they had a promotion group, and one of the last gigs I did in Hawaii was with Nubishax and in a group called K Theory, and they were just these low key kind of lowbrow folk, just out of Berkeley, and they were making really good music, and so just the whole world sort of changed. They were in the new era. They were much younger, and so they kind of have come into the world, and DJing for them was just sort of make the noise, brah, like make it happen, and so it took a while for, I think, the status quo to kind of catch up to that. So Nubish was right on the money that, like, back in 2012 and 2013, it's kind of unthinkable that you would actually like play with a controller. And so it ended up being a little bit of a safety net for me. I would rent a studio out and practice with the controller, and then the team would let me play on the actual house equipment when the night was over or before the night began, or if they would set them up on a weekend sometime, I'd go over and actually learn how to DJ with that equipment. So nowadays, though, you don't necessarily need that, because Pioneer makes a controller that actually mimics the stuff that are actually in the clubs. And so it doesn't take much for a user to actually get up and running pretty quickly with some familiarity.
Does having the controller there paper over that? Does it make it harder to distinguish a good performer from a bad one?
All good questions. I think you've kind of hit the nail on the head on some of this, is that there are some concepts that are consistent no matter what tool that you use to sort of, make that happen. And so, the beat matching, and then you also kind of touch on some other concepts like phrase matching, and then also like harmonic mixing, where you have like two different songs that actually sound like they go together due to the way that they are coded in their music. And then so there's all those DJ concepts that exist, whether or not you're even DJing at all, whether you're just DJing in a classroom in a book, because some classrooms just have you learn about these things, right? So there's definitely some of those principles that hold true. And then whether or not the tool enables you to overlook that or not is really a factor of the DJ, because the answer is maybe, sort of. Like, some of the tools are so good now that they'll do a couple of technological advancements, sort of like enablements, if you will. These are software programmatic enhancements. If you hit a button, for example, on your controller, it will actually beat match the two tracks for you. Now, there's a catch. You have to pre-process the tracks before the grid that it sort of quantizes to are actually synchronized together. So it might auto read the track and set a beat grid at a certain sort of matrix, if you will, but it might need some slight adjustments based on algorithms and how they do their beat detection, right? So any wise DJ would never go into a set or an event having never played a track before ever. They would have at least had to have heard the track once, right? So there's a digital equivalent of that. If you don't load your tracks into your software and then process it, and then actually sort of say, okay, now what key is this in, and what BPM is this in? Now this should go here and not in this. You kind of have to do that sorting, right? I think that's the part that distinguishes the people who are using the technology to sort of just play the DJ versus those who are actually like sort of, okay, putting in that sort of effort. Because it definitely requires a little bit more attention than just pressing buttons. And so for that part, there's always your mileage may vary.
See dealer for details. Offer void in Saskatchewan.
Also offer void in some areas.
Nick's, so I just had a thought. I gotta tell my friend this, that we need to dig up some of those old wild pitch mixes. You remember those? They would have records they would change, huh?
I don't know what you mean by wild pitch.
Yeah, okay. There was a thing, like, it was probably late 90s for a while. I know there's a few Josh Wank records that did this, but they would change pitch in the middle of the song. Like, not so much that you'd know, but just like they go from 135 to 133 beats per minute. Like, what?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And if you didn't know that it was going to do that, you're in trouble. You are in.
Yeah, if you were trying to mix in a song during that little like dissonant sort of creative diversion in the song where it went from a slower tempo to a faster one, you would definitely fire and forget. And that's where these automated systems wouldn't catch that either.
Exactly.
So if you depend on those going into the night, oh boy, it's going to be a rough night for that person.
You're gonna have a bad time. Yeah,
you're gonna have a bad time.
So basically, for the non DJs among us here, if you're mixing a record into another one, you're gonna mix it with an earlier part of the song when you're getting the speed set up in your headphones. So you've already queued the record up, you've got the speed set, blah blah blah, and you're ready to bring it in, and all of a sudden the tempo changes on the first record, but you don't know. So all of a sudden
we call moving the goalposts.
Yeah, that would sound horrible.
We have a phrase for that called shoes in the dryer. Because if you put a pair of shoes in the dryer,
it sounds like the horse is galloping. Do.
Oh well, that's the first level of fail for a DJ. Like you've either got it locked, you got galloping, and then you've got shoes in the dryer. In the post game, I'll say this for the post game. In the post game, you gotta remember to, because I am sure I'll forget. But ask me about the most amazing DJ moment that I've ever seen, and it was a train wreck. It's awesome. It's freaking dope. It's a little party in a grocery store in Indianapolis. So at any rate. Once again, we are discussing cleaning up your room and how creative placement of a camera can avoid the necessity to do so. So, okay, it was about 95, something like that. There was a party in Indiana. I don't remember if it was in Indianapolis proper or where it was, but it was an abandoned grocery store, right? So picture like the back like loading area of the grocery store. It was DJ Trax from Chicago. Have you ever seen him? I don't know if he still plays anymore. This was a long time ago. Like straight up Chicago house, like Relief Records, like that kind of thing. Like hard Chicago jackin' house, right? Anyway, he was playing, and he just screwed up a mix. Like it was bad. It was shoes in a dryer, garbage, just trash, right? Like now he wasn't playing bad before then. I think that somebody bumped the table or something happened, because it just all of a sudden just went to just crap. Well, what he did, this was amazing. Now this was before here. Let me adjust my progressive lenses here. This was before each channel on the mixer had its own bass controls, right? This is an old MTX Sound Craftsman. Ask your grandpa. But
was that a rotary mixer?
It wasn't, but those are so nice. Those are so good. If you get like a Rain rotary, oh my god, it's butter. Anyway, love those mixers. I forgot all about them until just now. But but it was faders and all that, but it had just it had like a graphic equalizer that would affect the outside mix, not what's in your headphones, not what's on one channel. It would just affect the whole damn mix, right? So what he does is he takes all of the bass out, slams all the treble up, so it's just noise. It's just like a racket, and he fixes it while both records are playing. He doesn't slam the fader. He doesn't backspin. None of the cheesiness. He just shoves the treble all the way up, and he's just making a racket, and he starts like pumping his fist like he's just like super cool DJ Supreme on a Kaiser roll, and everybody's like, yeah. And so then he fixes it while it's playing, while it's just making this racket, and then he slams the bass all the way up, and the whole room, this room was just freaking packed, which sounds like a nightmare scenario now, but the whole room was freaking packed. And I was sitting up like on top of like a cooler or something like that, like a walk-in cooler type of thing, just kind of looking down on everything. and I just saw like this mass of ravers just whoom, and it was really crazy because it made like this wave type of thing. It was so neat, and just the room just exploded, and everybody was just like, yeah, and the whole thing was him screwing up, and I was like,
well, that's amazing.
That's where I learned that it's not if you screw up, it's how you screw up, because if you screw up right, then people will be talking about 20 years later.
Yeah, no doubt. I think that's a good point that you make. I think DJs have that, like, you know, like it has to be perfect. You know, I can't play unless I'm a perfect DJ. Right. But, you know, those mistakes sometimes can be kind of organic. If it's not the accidental note that gets played, that's the concern. It's the note right after that one, right? That one should be on top. I think it was an old musician. I'm sure there are some music aficionados and scholars that could probably tell us who that was. But someone did say that was, you know, and that's kind of jazz. It's not the accidental note. It's what you play after that. And so hopefully that gets back on track and it makes the accidental sort of a creative expression, creative sort of leeway. But yeah, you know, taking those moments of awe, you know, that you just shared. I love how you shared this moment on the dance floor where the DJ took a moment where there was just like this total chaos and the total dissonance from all the different sounds kind of clashing and crashing, and then sort of like took that energy and then like channeled it back to the crowd and to build excitement. Yeah. And that moment of tension is actually a really important point of the night for a DJ, is that you want to have the tension, and then you want that to build up into a release and the release of that tension. And those two things together really are what make DJing sort of emotionally, exponentially cooler than just like watching somebody perform, is when they're, telling a story essentially and using these, the two songs A and B to kind of make that story happen. Mm-hmm. And then that moment of the story where there's dissonance and there's like, you don't quite know where the bottom's coming out. That's often when the hands go up, because people are on the dance floor and those hands start to go up because, there is that sense of falling. There is that sense of the loss of gravity as the songs are kind of clashing and crashing. But yeah, a good DJ will actually use that moment and turn the tension into the release, especially if they really know the records and that bass drop that's coming, Mm-hmm. You almost want to take that moment and intentionally bring some dissonance because that very soon the bass is going to drop and all of that dissonance is gone, and that sucking out of the sound to create sort of like a wall of space that the dancers fill. Mm-hmm. Is quite exhilarating, and I'm sure contributed to what you remember about that moment. Just that sort of creative story that was told. And so DJs have been doing that ever since, thankfully, and using new tools to do it. And now we've got we've got DJs like Tiesto who have been around for 20 plus years and have reinvented themselves every time, a new style of music was kind of hot. It ended up, that you'd hear them making a track about it or DJing about it maybe for 6 months or a year, kind of adopting that sound and kind of making it theirs. And so, all these genres have sort of come and they've gone, like you were talking about earlier. Mm-hmm. It was great to go through the genre sort of timeline, because sites like beatport.com, for example, they have changed those genres and the charts over time have all changed. And so that it represents sort of like the evolutions in the music space too. So and every few years they'll change the genres again and kind of do like the massive power shift, right? And then mm-hmm. the power vacuum arrives and then other people. So deep house has gone, at least 2 or 3 different, iterations of it where, the style of deep house that you maybe recognize would be considered something different today. Yeah. And deep house would be, probably along the same lines, but maybe sound a little bit more modern. And so that modernization is kind of where we're at now. We're in this like modernization era where, the music isn't going away. The performers aren't going away. It's only getting more innovative. And so that's driving newer creative music. And coincidentally, instead of speeding things up, it's actually slowing down. Dance music is actually slowing down over time.
Like how
so in the early era.
Beats per minute? Like, how do you mean?
Yeah, tempo-wise, it's slowing down. Dance music and trance music techno all had sort of slightly different BPMs back in the 90s, and they were vastly different really back then. And now they're still, it's not uncommon to have a song that would be labeled as trance that could be anywhere from 138 beats per minute, 140 beats per minute, all the way down to 128 or even 124. Some slower songs are now sort of playing in the cross genres now, which would have been more of a house tempo, but now with trance elements. And so a lot of these fusion styles are coming out in the deep world, and a lot of it's labeled that way too. So we're seeing this amazing sort of innovation going on. That's why I say it's really never been a better time for people who are out there looking into music or thinking about music, or maybe at one point played music, to get back into it and to see kind of where they can go with it.
I wonder if the reason for the BPM slowdown, I wonder if that's because most people are doing it from home. You know what I mean? Like, they're not in a warehouse, like at 3:00 in the morning. They're not raging. They're probably working. You know what I mean? Like when they're listening to this. Do you think that might have something to do with it?
Well, yeah, I think, the club that Donald Glaude came out to here in Seattle, once again, the In Motion family, they have, a slower BPM compared to other clubs in town, where they maybe play a little bit faster. And so the Donald Glaude house crowd is slightly different than the, upbeat, Goa India kind of Goa style trance, where it's like 138, 140, this was an old style of music that you don't really hear anymore. It's called Psy trance now, PSY trance. And so Psy trance,
Goa
being
basically became Psy trance. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
To catch up the elder here, just like, okay.
Yeah, there's some meta gaming going on in that whole conversation there. Truly, though, but it, so yeah, it's slowed down, but it's kind of like vinyl, in a way as well. How vinyl was the de facto medium, then it went away, and now that once Technic stopped making the SL1200, it kind of like revitalized vinyl, and so it kind of brought vinyl almost back into, it's just as viable to play vinyl now as it is to play CDs, as it is to play controllers. So I mean, not many people are playing CDs anymore. In fact, there's the latest controversy there is that Pioneer's latest CDJ 3000, which was released last month, no longer had a CD mechanism drive in it, so you can't even load a CD in the CDJ anymore. Interestingly enough.
Yeah, no, that's ridiculous. And I guess that is kind of a, I mean, I feel like that seems to me like a boardroom decision. Like someone in the boardroom was like, well, we gotta call this line the CDJs. Yeah, but they don't play CDs anymore. Yeah, but we gotta call this the CDJs. Make it happen. I feel like that's one of those things. Like,
yeah, somebody says, hey, how much to add a drive mech into this model? Oh, $700. Okay, yeah, no, we'll leave it out. We're gonna keep the name, but
yeah. Oh, yeah. There you go. Yeah, that's true.
Crux.
Says, if you change the name, people looking for CDJs wouldn't be able to find them. Did that wave of dubstep a few years back contribute much to the BPM slowdown? That's a great question. What do you think?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. In fact, for that, I would actually defer that to some of my dubstep counterparts who, I could even suggest that Synshop, if you want to do another music night, if you want to have more, digitally connected and digitally wired folks come on board and talk about it. I actually have a friend who was one of the early pioneers of dubstep who taught me kind of everything I know about music production. And we can even have him on the show. It'd be a great resource to talk about dubstep and how that sort of alternative style of music kind of came in and brought almost a whole genre of people that had been left out of the world of electronic dance music, then were brought into the fold, and that's the headbangers. So dubstep kind of took the headbanger crowd and provided a little bit of a home for them in the way that style of music has evolved. And Tidance is right on the money there that, the slowdown, definitely had a lot to do with the way that people looked at beats per minute. And because of dubstep being a slower BPM, but being in the double time, tempo or pace, it created sort of this duality where a song that was slower could actually, in double time, be mixed with a song that was just as fast in single time. So there was sort of this like, crossover, this odd crossover of uncommon bedfellows, and so dubstep really did revitalize that. In fact, there's actually a famous duo that is playing today that have really owned this, and that's Jason Ross and Seven Lions.
Mhm.
Typically, both of them they're vastly different genres, but because Seven Lions sort of really got into the dubstep and the melodic dubstep, and then did so at a pace that Jason Ross sort of produced that with his sort of faster trance songs, there was actually a natural overlap that did occur. And when they mixed the two songs, even though one was at double time and the other one was at sort of regular standard time, it ended up becoming a very even blend. And so that was done in 2017 at the Gorge. ABGT 250, if you want to YouTube that, their final set, Seven Lions, Jason Ross, incredible mixture of styles of music. Stylistically, it was really kind of like the shot heard around the world when it comes to two huge artists coming together in one set.
Hi, I'm the Mighty Pong, host of the show that you just got done watching. Hey, if you'd like to see the entire show and not just the first hour, make sure that you watch on twitch.tv/SYN Shop every Friday night for the main show. And on Monday nights, we have our special project night. So you can join us, build something, and basically throw stuff at us while we try to concentrate on things. It's a lot of fun. Kind of. But hey, anyway, we hope to see you there. It's a lot of fun. So join us over there, twitch.tv/SYN Shop. I am, of course, the Mighty Pong, and we will see you there. One take. Not one take.